Have you ever been traveling down the road and suddenly discovered yourself behind a brand new truck that costs more than most individuals' residences? You recognize the one I'm referencing. The gleaming machine with chrome components everywhere, leather interior that probably costs more than your monthly housing payment, and a financing obligation that would make your loan officer concerned. And here's the thing that genuinely puzzles me. The individual operating it likely generates less income than you do. So what's occurring here? How are regular individuals somehow managing these astronomical vehicle payments that seem to contradict fundamental mathematics? My name is Peter, and I dedicate considerable time contemplating money and why individuals execute the financial choices they do. If you've ever questioned how your neighbor can manage that $70,000 pickup truck while discussing grocery expenses, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if it helps clarify this modern puzzle. Now, before we explore the mechanics of how individuals are accomplishing this, let me illustrate what we're genuinely dealing with here. The typical new vehicle payment in America has crossed into territory that would have been considered absolutely unreasonable merely a decade ago. We're discussing monthly obligations that exceed what many individuals allocate for housing. And yet somehow, countless Americans are signing documents every single month, departing the dealership in vehicles that cost more than the median household income. But here's where it becomes genuinely fascinating. Most of these individuals aren't secretly wealthy people hiding their prosperity. They're not digital currency billionaires or privileged individuals. They're educators, healthcare workers, technicians, retail employees, and office workers. Regular people with regular positions who somehow located a method to make the numbers function, or at minimum they believe they did. The reality is there's a complete system designed to make these impossible obligations seem achievable. And comprehending how this system functions isn't merely about satisfying curiosity. It's about protecting yourself from executing a financial choice that could derail your future for the next 7 to 10 years. Let's begin with the most obvious question. How much are we genuinely discussing here? Because when I inform individuals the typical vehicle payment numbers, they usually assume I'm inventing them. The typical new vehicle payment has climbed to above $700 monthly, $700. That's not for a luxury automobile or some exotic sports vehicle. That's the typical payment for a regular new vehicle purchased by a regular individual. But it becomes worse when you begin examining trucks and SUVs, which have become the default selection for most American purchasers. These obligations routinely exceed $900 monthly. And it's not uncommon to observe payments above $1,200. $200 every single month for 6, 7, or even 8 years. We're discussing obligations that total more than $80,000 throughout the life of the financing. And that's before you calculate insurance, maintenance, and fuel expenses. Now, you might be considering, well, Peter, perhaps individuals are merely generating substantially more income these days. Perhaps wages have increased enough to support these kinds of obligations. And if that's what you're considering, I regret being the messenger of disappointing news. But that's not what's occurring at all. The median household income has increased certainly, but nowhere near enough to justify these payment amounts using traditional financial wisdom. So, how are individuals executing it? The answer lies in a combination of elements that have fundamentally altered how Americans approach vehicle purchasing. And none of these elements are necessarily positive news for the individuals signing these financing documents. First, let's discuss financing terms. Remember when a vehicle loan was 3 years, perhaps 4 if you genuinely stretched it. Those days are as obsolete as outdated technology. Today's vehicle loans routinely stretch 6, 7, or 8 years into the future. Some lenders are even offering 10-year vehicle loans, which honestly sounds like something from a financial nightmare. The appeal is obvious. If you distribute that $60,000 truck payment across 8 years instead of 4, the monthly obligation drops significantly. Suddenly, that truck that would have demanded a $1,500 monthly payment across 4 years becomes manageable at $900 across 8 years. The monthly number appears reasonable, which is precisely what the purchaser focuses on. But here's what most individuals don't contemplate when they're positioned in that dealership. By extending the financing term, they're not merely lowering the monthly obligation, they're dramatically increasing the total amount they'll allocate for the vehicle. That $900 payment across 8 years accumulates to above $86,000 compared to approximately $72,000 if they had accepted the 4-year financing. That's an extra $14,000 merely for the privilege of possessing a lower monthly obligation. Even worse, they'll be executing payments on that truck long after it's worth a fraction of what they allocated for it. Vehicles depreciate rapidly, particularly in the first several years. By year 5 or 6 of that 8-year financing, they'll owe significantly more than the vehicle is worth. They'll be trapped in what's described as negative equity, unable to sell or exchange the vehicle without writing a check to manage the difference. But extended financing terms are merely the beginning of how individuals are making these obligations function. The second major element is the rise of 0% financing and other promotional interest rates. Enter any dealership and you'll observe signs advertising 0% APR for qualified purchasers. Sounds incredible, correct? Complimentary financing to purchase that new truck. Here's the thing about those 0% offers that dealers definitely don't want you to comprehend. They're not genuinely complimentary financing. The expense of that financing is incorporated into the price of the vehicle. You're either allocating full price for the vehicle and receiving 0% financing, or you're receiving a discount on the vehicle and allocating market rate interest, but you're not receiving both. More significantly, those 0% offers usually arrive with strict qualification requirements and shorter financing terms. The individuals who genuinely qualify for 0% financing are typically the identical individuals who could manage to allocate cash for the vehicle anyway. For everyone else, the interest rates on these extended vehicle loans can be substantial, particularly if their credit isn't excellent. Then there's the exchange game, which has become increasingly significant in how individuals manage these large vehicle payments. Here's how it typically functions. Someone purchases a new vehicle with a 6 or 7 year financing. After 3 or 4 years, they're exhausted of the vehicle or desire something newer, but they still owe more on the financing than the vehicle is worth. So what do they execute? They incorporate that negative equity into a new financing for an even more expensive vehicle. This creates a cycle where individuals are constantly allocating for vehicles they no longer possess, while simultaneously accepting debt for new vehicles. Their financing balances keep expanding even though they're executing payments every month. It's like a financial exercise wheel, where the faster you operate, the further behind you become. The dealers appreciate this arrangement because it creates customers for existence. Once someone is trapped in the negative equity cycle, they become a captive audience for new vehicle purchases. They can't manage to break free from the cycle because executing so would require writing a check for thousands of dollars merely to exit their current financing. But perhaps the most concerning trend is how normalized these extreme vehicle payments have become. Individuals who would never imagine allocating $100 monthly on anything else somehow convince themselves that it's reasonable for transportation. Contemplate it this way. If someone informed you they were allocating $200 monthly on coffee, you'd probably organize an intervention. If they stated they were allocating that much on clothing every month, you'd assume they possessed a serious purchasing addiction. But somehow when it's a vehicle payment, we merely acknowledge and state, well, you require reliable transportation. This normalization didn't occur by accident. It's the result of decades of marketing that has convinced Americans that their vehicle is an extension of their identity. Your truck isn't merely transportation. It's a statement about who you are as an individual. It demonstrates that you're successful, reliable, industrious. And if you're not operating something impressive, well, what does that communicate about you? The automotive industry has become incredibly sophisticated at accessing these psychological triggers. They don't sell vehicles anymore. They sell lifestyles, aspirations, and social position. That commercial displaying the rugged truck climbing mountains isn't selling you transportation. It's selling you the fantasy that you're the category of individual who climbs mountains, even though the closest you approach to off-roading is parking on grass at the county gathering. This emotional manipulation makes it considerably simpler for individuals to justify payments that would otherwise seem completely irrational. When you're not merely purchasing a truck, but purchasing into an identity, suddenly that $900 payment feels like an investment in yourself rather than a financial mistake. But let's return to the practical mechanics of how individuals are genuinely making these obligations function in their monthly budgets. Because even with extended terms and emotional justification, $700 to $200 is still substantial capital for most households. This is where things become genuinely creative. And by creative, I mean potentially disastrous for long-term financial wellness. Many individuals are essentially restructuring their complete financial existence around their vehicle payment. They're treating it like a housing payment and adjusting everything else accordingly. I've observed individuals relocate to smaller apartments or remain with roommates longer than they organize merely so they can manage their dream truck payment. They'll consume budget meals for lunch every day while operating to employment in a vehicle that costs more than some individuals' residences. They'll skip trips, avoid restaurants, and postpone other major purchases, all to support a vehicle payment that consumes 25 to 30% of their take-home income. Some individuals are accepting second positions specifically to manage their vehicle expenses. They'll operate for rideshare organizations or deliver food on weekends using their expensive truck to generate the income required to allocate for that identical expensive truck. It's like a bizarre form of automotive servitude, where your vehicle becomes both your controller and your means of survival. Others are accessing retirement accounts or accepting loans against their 401k to execute down payments or manage repair expenses. They're borrowing from their future selves to finance their current transportation fantasies. And since most individuals are terrible at calculating the genuine expense of early retirement withdrawals, they don't recognize they're potentially sacrificing hundreds of thousands in future prosperity for a truck that will be worth practically nothing in 10 years. Then there's the credit card rotation that's become increasingly common. Individuals will position maintenance, repairs, insurance, and fuel expenses on credit cards to release cash for their monthly vehicle payment. They're essentially using high-interest debt to subsidize their transportation expenses, which is like using excessive heat to ignite a cigarette. Technically it functions, but it's probably not the smartest approach. The most concerning trend I've observed is individuals accepting personal loans or home equity loans to manage down payments or negative equity from previous vehicles. They're leveraging their residences to purchase vehicles, which fundamentally misunderstands the purpose of both assets. Your residence should be constructing prosperity across time. Your vehicle should be transporting you from location A to location B as efficiently as achievable. When you begin using your residence to finance your vehicle addiction, you've obtained the equation backwards. But here's where the narrative becomes even more fascinating. Many of the individuals executing these extreme sacrifices for their vehicle payments aren't merely executing it for one vehicle. They're executing it for multiple vehicles. The typical American household now possesses more vehicles than licensed operators, which is mathematically impressive and financially terrifying. It's not uncommon to locate families with 2 or 3 vehicle payments operating simultaneously. Father possesses his work truck, mother possesses her SUV for the children, and perhaps there's a third vehicle for the teenager or for weekend adventures. Suddenly, we're discussing combined vehicle payments that exceed what most individuals allocate for housing. These families have essentially created their own personal auto-financing organizations. Except instead of generating capital, they're losing it every month. They're managing multiple depreciation schedules, insurance policies, maintenance schedules, and financing terms. It's like operating a small business, except the business loses capital every day and the inventory becomes worthless across time. The psychological effect of managing multiple vehicle payments is fascinating and disturbing. Individuals become experts at juggling due dates and minimum payments, but they lose sight of the bigger perspective. They'll celebrate completing one vehicle financing while simultaneously accepting 2 new ones. They measure success by their ability to maintain all the elements functioning rather than questioning whether they require to be managing elements at all. And then there's the insurance component that most individuals completely underestimate when calculating affordability. Insuring a $60,000 truck costs significantly more than insuring a $20,000 sedan. Include comprehensive coverage, collision coverage, gap insurance, and all the other protections recommended for expensive vehicles. And you're examining insurance premiums that can easily exceed $200 monthly. For families with multiple expensive vehicles, insurance expenses can approach or exceed $500 monthly. That's $6,000 yearly, merely for the privilege of legally operating their depreciating assets on public roads. Many individuals focus so intensely on negotiating the monthly payment that they completely neglect to calculate the ongoing insurance expenses until they're positioned in the insurance agent's office receiving a reality verification. The maintenance expenses present another surprise that captures many individuals unprepared. Modern vehicles, particularly trucks and SUVs, are incredibly complex machines with advanced technology, sophisticated emission systems, and premium components. When something malfunctions, and it will malfunction, the repair expenses can be staggering. A simple brake service on a modern truck can easily cost $800 to about $200. Transmission issues can operate $5,000 or more. And if you're unfortunate enough to require major engine work, you might be examining repair expenses that exceed $10,000. Many individuals executing extreme vehicle payments possess zero emergency reserves allocated for these inevitable repairs, which means they'll likely finish up positioning major maintenance on credit cards or accepting additional loans. This creates a vicious cycle where the vehicle payment that was supposed to be manageable becomes the catalyst for a debt spiral that can require years to escape. You'll observe individuals with pristine $70,000 trucks positioned in their driveways while they frantically search their furniture cushions for fuel capital. It's like possessing a premium timepiece while existing on budget meals. Technically impressive, but missing the concept entirely. The fuel expenses alone for these massive vehicles can approach what individuals used to allocate for complete vehicle payments merely a decade ago. When you're operating a truck that achieves 15 miles per gallon in genuine world conditions and fuel prices fluctuate between $3 and $5 per gallon, you're examining fuel expenses that can easily exceed $400 monthly for someone with a normal commute. Include the occasional road trip or weekend adventure, and that number climbs even higher. But here's where the mathematics becomes genuinely fascinating, and by fascinating, I mean absolutely terrifying from a financial planning perspective. Let's accept a typical scenario and operate the genuine numbers that most individuals never bother to calculate. Imagine someone purchases a $55,000 truck with a 7-year financing at 6% interest. The monthly payment functions out to approximately $800, which feels manageable compared to the $1,500 payment they would have faced with a shorter financing term. Throughout the life of that financing, they'll allocate approximately $67,000 total. Include insurance at $250 monthly, and that's another $21,000 across 7 years. Calculate fuel expenses of $350 monthly, and we're discussing another $29,000. Maintenance and repairs across 7 years will easily operate another $15,000, probably more. When you accumulate it all up, this individual will allocate above $130,000 on transportation across 7 years. And at the conclusion of those 7 years, they'll possess a vehicle that's worth perhaps $15,000 if they're fortunate. They've essentially allocated $130,000 for the privilege of operating a $15,000 truck. That's not transportation financing. That's wealth destruction, with beverage holders and heated seating. The most depressing aspect of this equation is what that identical capital could have accomplished if invested instead. If someone accepted that $800 monthly payment and invested it in a simple index vehicle earning 8% yearly, they'd possess above $70,000 after 7 years. Not only would they have avoided the financial burden of the truck, they would have genuinely constructed prosperity instead of destroying it. But here's the psychological trap that makes this cycle so difficult to break. Once someone commits to these extreme vehicle payments, they develop what I describe as automotive attachment syndrome. They become emotionally attached to their financial captor. The truck isn't merely transportation anymore. It's a reflection of their identity, their hard work, their success. The concept of operating something more affordable feels like admitting failure or accepting a lower social position. This emotional attachment makes rational financial analysis nearly impossible. When someone proposes they could preserve hundreds of dollars monthly by operating a reliable pre-owned vehicle, they don't hear a practical financial approach. They hear an attack on their self-worth and their right to enjoy the results of their labor. They'll defend their truck payment with the identical passion they defend their family, even though that truck payment might be preventing them from genuinely providing for their family's future. The automotive industry comprehends this psychology superior to most individuals comprehend themselves. They've allocated billions of dollars investigating precisely how to trigger these emotional responses and convert them into financing signatures. Enter any dealership, and you'll notice they don't allocate much time discussing total expense of ownership or opportunity expense of capital. Instead, they concentrate on monthly payments, immediate satisfaction, and social position. The sales process has been refined to overcome every rational objection a purchaser might possess. Concerned about the payment being excessive? Let's extend the term. Worried about reliability? Here's an extended warranty you can finance. Nervous about depreciation? Don't concern about it. You'll probably desire to exchange it for something newer, in several years anyway. So there you possess it. The mystery of how individuals are managing these extreme vehicle payments isn't genuinely a mystery at all. It's a carefully orchestrated system of extended financing terms, emotional manipulation, and financial gymnastics that would make a circus performer envious. Individuals aren't genuinely managing these obligations in any meaningful sense. They're merely postponing the financial consequences down the road while convincing themselves they deserve that shiny truck. The next time you observe someone operating a vehicle that costs more than your residence, remember, they're probably consuming budget cereal for dinner to manage it. And perhaps, merely perhaps, that reliable pre-owned vehicle in your driveway isn't appearing so disappointing after all.